In my last session, I have discussed general information regarding the nature and characteristics of Indian philosophy along with the survey of development process of Indian philosophy. Now I would like to give you a brief introduction about the schools of Indian philosophy, which consist of orthodox and heterodox systems of Indian philosophy. First of all, I would like to take Nyaya school of Indian philosophy. This philosophical thought of the ancient Hindus is brought to a point and summarized in 6 main systems. They are Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa, Vedanta, Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya and Vaisheshika, ascribed to Jaimini, Badarayana, Kapila, Patanjali, Gautama and Kanad respectively. These are called orthodox systems not because they posit God as the creator or ultimate reality, but because they derive their authority in some manner from the Vedas and maintain the existence of Atman, soul, as distinct and independent of body and mind. While the yoga system of Patanjali advises worship of God as a spiritual exercise, it does not concede the absolute necessity of such belief for the attainment of liberation. Mimamsa and Sankhya do not admit of the existence of a personal God, and in other systems God appears in varying roles. The founders, actual or legendary, of the orthodox systems should be considered schools rather than individuals, since nothing is known of them except their names. Nyaya system of Indian philosophy. The Nyaya philosophy was founded by the great sage Gautama, who was also known as Gautam or Akshpad. Accordingly, the Nyaya is also known as the Akshpad system. The philosophy is primarily concerned with the conditions of correct thinking and the means of acquiring a true knowledge of reality. It is very useful in developing the powers of logical thinking and rigorous criticism in its students. So, we have such other names for the Nyaya philosophy as Nyaya Vidya, Tark Shastra and Anvikshiki, that is the science of critical study. Literature of Nyaya philosophy. The first work of Nyaya philosophy is the Nyaya Sutra of Gautama. The subsequent works of the Nyaya system, such as Vasayan's Nyaya Bhashya, Udyotkara's Nyaya Vartik, Vachaspati's Nyaya Vartik Tatparya Tika, Udayana's Nyaya Vartik Tatparya Parishuddhi and Nyaya Kusmanjali, Jayanta's Nyaya Manjari, etc. explain and develop the ideas contained in the Nyaya Sutra and also defend them against the attacks of hostile critics. The ancient school of the Nyaya, Prachin Nyaya, is thus a development of Sutra philosophy of Gautama through a process of attack, counter-attack and defense among the Nyayikas and their hard critics. The modern school of the Nyaya, which is Navya Nyaya, begins with the epoch-making work of Gangesh Upadhyaya, that is the Tattva Chintamani. This school flourished at first in Mithila, but subsequently became the glory of Bengal with Navadipa as the main center of its learning and teaching. The modern school lays almost exclusive emphasis on the logical aspects of the Nyaya and develops its theory of knowledge into a formal logic of relations between concepts, terms and propositions. With the advent of the modern Nyaya, the ancient school lost some of its popularity. Logical realism of Nyaya. The Nyaya philosophy is a system of logical realism. In philosophy, realism means the theory or doctrine that the existence of things or objects of the world are independent of all knowledge or relation to mind. The existence of ideas and images, feelings of pleasure and pain are dependent on some mind. These cannot exist unless they are experienced by some mind. But the existence of tables and chairs, plants and animals does not depend on our minds. These exist and will continue to exist whether we know them or not. Realism is a philosophical theory which holds that the existence of all things or the objects of the world are quite independent of all minds, finite or infinite, human or divine. Idealism, on the other hand, holds that things or objects can exist only as they are related to some mind. Just as feelings and cognitions exist only as they are in some mind, so the objects of the world exist only as they are actually experienced or at least thought of by us or by God. The Nyaya is a realistic philosophy insofar as it holds that the objects of the world have an independent existence of their own apart from all knowledge or experience. In the Nyaya, this realistic view of the world is based not on mere faith or feeling, intuition or scriptural testimony, but on logical grounds and critical reflections. According to it, the highest end of life, that is liberation, can be attained only through a right knowledge of reality. But a true knowledge of reality presupposes an understanding of what knowledge is, what the sources of knowledge are, how true knowledge is distinguished from wrong knowledge, and so forth. In other words, a theory or reality or metaphysics presupposes a theory of knowledge or epistemology. Hence, the realism of Nyaya is based on the theory of knowledge, which is the logical foundation of all philosophy. Thus, we see that the Nyaya is a system of philosophy which may be justly characterized as logical realism. The whole of Nyaya philosophy may be conveniently divided into four parts, namely the theory of knowledge, the theory of physical world, the theory of individual self and its liberation, and the theory of God. But as we have seen, the main focus of Nyaya philosophy is on epistemology. Consequently, I would like to discuss in brief some of the major issues related to the Nyaya theory of knowledge. The Nyaya theory of knowledge. Knowledge or cognition, Gyan or Buddhi, is the manifestation of objects. Just as the light of a lamp reveals or shows physical things, so knowledge manifests all objects that come before it. Knowledge is of different kinds. First, we have valid knowledge, Prama or Pramiti, which has been subdivided into perception, inference, comparison and testimony. Then we have non-valid knowledge, aprama, which includes memory, smriti, doubt, sanshaya, error, bhrama or viparyaya and hypothetical argument, that is tarka. This can be easily understood by a chart or table given below. Knowledge, it is divided into two parts. The first is prama, valid knowledge, other is aprama, that is non-valid knowledge. Prama or valid knowledge is further divided into four categories, which has been already mentioned earlier: perception, inference, comparison and testimony. On the other side, non-valid knowledge is also further divided into four sections: memory, doubt, error and tarka. Perception. Gautama defines perception as the knowledge which is produced by the intercourse of an object with a sense organ, undefinable, determinate and in harmony with its objects. This is इंद्रियार्थ सन्निकर्षो उत्पन्नम ज्ञानम अव्यपदेशम अव्यभिचारी व्यवसायात्मकम प्रत्यक्षम, which means the contact of senses with the objects produces the knowledge is known as perception. It is produced by the intercourse of a present object with external sense organs, their conjunction with manas and its conjunction with the self. The sense organs are directed by manas, which is directed by the self. Conjunction of sense organs with manas and conjunction of manas with the self are the general causes of perception. The intercourse of a sense organ with an object is a special course of perception. Perception is generated by it and not revealed. It is the immediate knowledge of a present object through a sense organ. Classification of perception. There are different ways of classifying perception. First, we have the distinction between laukika or ordinary perception and second is alaukik or extraordinary perceptions. These distinctions depends on the way in which the senses come in contact with their objects. We have laukika perception when there is the usual sense contact with the objects present to sense. In alaukik perception, however, the object is such as is not ordinarily present to sense, but is conveyed to sense through an unusual medium. Ordinary or laukik perception is of three types: indeterminate or nirvikalpa pratyaksha, determinate or savikalpa pratyaksha and pratyabhigya recognition. Similarly, extraordinary or alaukik perception is also of the three types: samanya lakshana, gyan lakshana and yogaj. Nirvikalpa or indeterminate perception is the primary cognition of an object and its diverse characters without any judgment to interrelate them. Savikalpa or determinate perception is the cognition of an object as possessed of some character, while nirvikalpa is the cognition of the existence of a thing as such. Savikalpa may be said to be the recognition of its nature. Pratyabhigya is recognition in its literal meaning. It is a recognition of some object, that is, a cognition of it as that which was cognized before. In it we know immediately that the thing which we now cognize is the same as that which was cognized before. Alaukika or extraordinary perception is also of three types. First of these is called Samanya Lakshana. The Nayayika explains the knowledge of this class by extraordinary perception, in which the class man is presented through the class essence or the universal manhood. When I perceive a man as man, I do perceive the manhood in him. Otherwise, I cannot directly recognize him as man. Now, this direct knowledge or perception of universal manhood is the medium through which I perceive all men or the class of men. To perceive manhood is to perceive all men so far as they are possessed of the universal manhood. In short, to perceive manhood is to perceive all men as the individuals in which the universal manhood inheres. This perception of the class of men being due to the perception of the universal. Samanya is called Samanya Lakshana perception and is marked off as extraordinary alaukic on account of its obvious difference from our ordinary perceptions. The second kind of extraordinary perception is called Jnana Lakshana. When on seeing something one says, I see a piece of fragrant sandalwoods, one has a perception of its fragrance by means of one's eyes. How can we explain this visual perception of fragrance, which can ordinarily be sensed only by the sense of smell? The Nayayika says that here our past olfactory experience of fragrance as closely associated with the visual appearance of sandalwood is vividly revived and brings about the present visual perception of fragrance simultaneously with that of its color. This present perception of fragrance being due to the revived past knowledge of fragrance has been called Jnana Lakshana perception, which is also extraordinary in the sense that it is brought about by a sense organ which is not ordinarily capable of perceiving fragrance. The third kind of extraordinary perception is called Yogaj. It is the intuitive perception of all objects, past and future, hidden and infinitesimal by one who possesses some supernatural power generated in the mind by devout meditation yoga abhyasa. In the case of those who have attained spiritual perfection yukta, such intuitive knowledge of all objects is constant and spontaneous. In the case of others who are on the way to perfection, it requires the help of concentration as an auxiliary condition. A table showing the classification of perception is this. Perception, which is classified into two sections, ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary is further divided into three: indeterminate or nirvikalpa pratyaksha, determinate or savikalpa pratyaksha, recognition or recognition or pratyabhigya. Likely, extraordinary perception is also divided into three: Samanya Lakshana, Jnana Lakshana and Yogas. The second is inference. It comes after perception. Inference is mediate knowledge, while perception is immediate knowledge. Perception apprehends present and near objects, while inference apprehends past, future and remote objects as well as present and near objects. Perception does not depend upon the knowledge of Vyapti, but inference is based upon it, and without which it is not possible. There is no scope for inference where we can have perception. Inference is called Anumana because it is a kind of knowledge, man, which we get after Anu, some other knowledge or perception. One thing in addition, I would like to mention that the foundation of inference is Vyapti, and Vyapti is known as invariable relation, and this is an inseparable relation within the two things, and Anuman is based on Vyapti. Now we come to the classification of inference. The Nayakas give three different classifications of inference which we shall consider. Now, according to the first classification, inference is of two kinds, namely Swartha Anuman and Parartha Anuman, or inference for oneself and inference for others. This is a psychological classification which has in view the use or purpose which an inference serves. An inference may be intended either for the acquisition of some knowledge on our part or for the demonstration of a known truth to other persons. In the first case, we have Swartha Anuman or inference for oneself. In the second, we have Parartha Anuman or inference meant for others. According to another classification, we have three kinds of inference, namely Purvat, Sheshvat and Samanya Todrashta, which come in the form of chart. It has three sections: Purvat Anuman, Sheshvat Anuman and Samanyato Drashta Anuman. This classification is based, especially of the first two, is based on the causation, and Purvata Anuman is based on the cause and Sheshvat Anuman is based on effect, while Samanyato Drashta is based on a common or the usual relation between the two things. A third classification gives the three kinds of inference, that is Kevalanvayi, Keval Vyatireki and Anvay Vyatireki. This classification is more logical in as much as it is based on the nature of the induction by which we get the knowledge of Vyapti on which inferences depend. Inference is shown in three sections: Kevalanvayi, Keval Vyatireki and Anvay Vyatireki. The next is Upaman or comparison. Upamana is the third source of valid knowledge accepted by Nyaya. It is the source of our knowledge of the relation between a name and things so named or between a word and its denotation. We have such knowledge when we are told by some authoritative person that a word denotes a class of objects of a certain description on the basis of the given description. Apply the word to some object or objects which fit in with that description, although we might not have seen them before. For example, a man who does not know what a gavai or wild cow is may be told by a forester that it is an animal like the cow. If subsequently he happens to meet with such an animal in the forest and knows or recognizes it as a wild cow, then his knowledge will be due to upamana or comparison. Next is Shabda Praman or testimony. Shabda is the last pramana accepted by the Nyaya. Literally, Shabda means verbal knowledge. It is the knowledge of objects derived from words or sentences. All verbal knowledge, however, is not valid. Hence, Shabda as a pramana is defined in the Nyaya as valid verbal testimony. It consists in the assertion of a trustworthy person. Now, I would like to give the details of Vaisheshika philosophy, which is an associated system of Nyaya, and Nyaya and Vaisheshika both are known as the Yugal systems. The Vaisheshika system was founded by Kanad. It is so named in view of the fact that Vishesha, a category, has been elaborately discussed in it. The founder of this philosophy was surnamed Kanad because he led the life of an ascetic and used to live on grains of corn gleaned from the field. He was also named Uluk. So, the Vaisheshika philosophy is also known as Kanada or Aulukya system. The first systematic work of this philosophy is the Vaisheshika Sutra of Kanad. Prashast Padas Padarth Dharma Sangrah, usually known as the Bhashya, reads like an independent exposition of the Vaisheshika philosophy. Vaisheshika believe in several categories which I would like to discuss. What is category? First, I would like to give you the meaning of Padartha or category. Padartha literally means the meaning of a word. It is an object of knowledge and capable of being named. So, it is knowable and nameable. It is an object of valid knowledge. Kanad brings all objects of valid knowledge under 6 categories. These are substance, dravya, quality, guna, action or motion, karma, generality, samanya, particularity, vishesha, and inherence, samavaya. Kanad does not mention non-existence or negation. The later Vaisheshikas add the 7th category of non-existence. Sridhara, Udayana and Shivaditya recognize 7 categories including non-existence. The first category is substance or dravya. Kanad defines a substance as an entity which has qualities and actions and which is the inherent or material cause of an effect. A substance is the substrate of qualities and actions. It is not a mere collection of qualities and actions. It is not a mere aggregate of qualities as the Buddhist realists maintain, nor it is a mere complex of ideas as Buddhist idealist maintains. It has a real objective existence. It differs from its qualities and actions because it is their substance. If it were not different from them, it would not be their substrate. Qualities and actions are devoid of qualities and actions. They are not self-existent, but they exist in a substance. The relation between a substance and its qualities and actions is inherence. The second category is known as quality or guna. Kannada defines quality as an entity inhering in a substance and devoid of quality, which is not an unconditional cause of conjunction and disjunction. Prashastpada adds one more characteristics of a quality. He defines it as an entity related the genus of quality, abiding in a substance and devoid of quality and action. There are altogether 24 kinds of qualities. These are rupa or color, rasa or taste, gandha or smell, sparsha or touch, shabda or sound, sankhya or number, pariman or magnitude, pratikatva or distinctness, sanyog or conjunction, vibhaga or disjunction, paratva or remoteness, aparatva or nearness, buddhi or cognition, sukha or pleasure, dukha or pain, ichha or desire, dvesh or aversion, prayatna or effort, gurutva or heaviness, dravatva or fluidity, sneha or viscidity, sanskara or tendency, dharma or merit and adharma as demerit. Third category is action or karma. Karma or action is physical movement. Like a quality, it belongs only to substance, but is different from both. A substance is the support of both quality and action. A quality is a static character of things, but an action is dynamic. What a quality is a passive property that does not take us beyond the thing it belongs to. Action is a transitive process by which one thing reaches another. So, it is regarded as the independent cause of the conjunction and disjunction of things. An action has no quality because the latter belongs only to substance. Fourth category is generality or samanya. Things of a certain class bear a common name because they possess a common nature. Men, cows and swans have severally something in common on account of which they bear these general names. The thought of what they have in common is called a general idea or class concept. Now the question is, what is it that they have in common, or what is the something that is common in them and is the ground of their being brought under one class and called by the same name? The first answer, which is only provisional, is that it is the class essence corresponding to the class concept. The Nyaya Vaisheshikas would say that it is their samanya or generality. Next category is of particularity or vishesha. Kanada defines particularity as the ultimate distinguishing feature of an eternal substance, which is known by its discrimination from the other eternal substances. It depends upon the intellect to indicate its existence. Particularities are the final distinctive characters of eternal substances. They subsist in the eternal substances, the atoms, ether, time, space, self and manas. One particularity inheres in each of them, which distinguishes it from the other eternal substances. Particularities do not require other particularities to distinguish them from one another, because it would lead to infinite regress. They not only distinguish their substrates from one another, they distinguish themselves from one another. They distinguish their substrates from one another without the aid of other attributes, because then they would lose their distinctive character. They are devoid of a community. If they had a community, they would distinguish their substrates from one another. They exist in single substances only. They do not exist through inherence of being in them, which is a generality. Sixth category is known as samavaya or inherence. It is a type of relation. There are two main relations recognized in the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy. These are sanyoga or conjunction and samavaya or inherence. Conjunction is a temporary or non-eternal relation between two things which can and usually do exist in separation from each other, while samavaya is a permanent or eternal relation between two entities, of which one inheres in the other. Seventh and the last category is known as non-existence or abhava. We have discussed till now with the 6 positive categories. Now we come to the negative category of abhava or non-existence, which does not come under any of the 6 categories. The reality of non-existence cannot be denied. Looking at the sky at night, you feel as much sure of the non-existence of the sun there as of the existence of the moon and the stars. The Vaisheshika recognizes therefore non-existence as the 7th category of reality. So, these are the 7th categories of Vaisheshika philosophy. Now, I will start to discuss some major points of Sankhya philosophy and Yoga philosophy. The Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhya system advocates the ontological dualism of Prakriti and Purusha's individual souls. It believes in the evolution of the cosmos, including matter, life and mind, out of the eternal Prakriti to serve the ends of an infinite number of individual souls. The dualism of Prakriti and souls is the fundamental doctrine of Sankhya system. The Sankhya system derives its name from the word Sankhya, meaning number, since it enumerates the metaphysical principles of reality, or the word Sankhya may mean perfect knowledge. The Sankhya system is the work of a great sage of the name of Kapila. According to the tradition, the first work of the Sankhya school is the Sankhya Sutra of Kapil. This being very brief and terse, Kapila wrote an elaborate work entitled the Sankhya Pravachan Sutra. Hence, Sankhya philosophy is also known as Sankhya Pravachan. But these works were lost in course of time and we have no information about their contents. Ishwar Krishna's Sankhya Karika is the earliest available and authoritative text book of Sankhya. The metaphysics of Sankhya. The nature of Purusha and Prakriti and their relation form the central doctrine of Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhya reduction of the numerous categories, especially those of Nyaya Vaisheshika systems, into two fundamental categories of Purusha and Prakriti for describing the world makes the Sankhya philosophy a real advance on the theory of atomic pluralism. Concept of Prakriti. Prakriti is the state of equilibrium of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, which are substances and constitute Prakriti. They are in a state of equipoise, which is not inactivity but a kind of tension. Prakriti is the trial of gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, and not a different entity which is their substratum. They are not its attributes, but its very form. This is the definition of the original Prakriti, Mula Prakriti, the root evoluent, which is not caused. It is the uncaused cause or the first cause. The Sankhya advocates the dualism of Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti is unconscious while Purusha is conscious. Prakriti is known while Purusha is knower. Prakriti cannot give rise to a soul, which also cannot give rise to Prakriti. So the Sankhya advocates neither materialism nor spiritualism. It holds that Prakriti evolves for the sake of the Purusha. The evolution of Prakriti is subservient to the ends of the Purushas, experience and liberation. It is not mechanical but teleological, though there is unconscious finality in it. Concept of gunas. Prakriti is constituted by Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, which are called the gunas. There are not qualities but substances, which are the ultimate elements of Prakriti. They are called gunas because they are subordinate to the souls, realizing their ends, or because they are the three strands in the constitution of Prakriti, even as three strands in a string, or because they fetter the souls to empirical life. They are substances because They are capable of conjunction and disjunction, and because they have qualities, they are not perceived but inferred from their effects. They are of the nature of pleasure, pain, and delusion. They are feeling substances. Sattva manifests an object to consciousness. Rajas is the principle of activity and makes an object move and act. Tamas is inertia, resistance or restraint. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas have the function of manifestation, activities and restraint respectively. They produce pleasure, pain and delusion or indifference respectively. Evolution. Prakriti is the substratum of the changing phenomena of the world. It is the equilibrium of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. It is not a state of inactivity, but a kind of tension. The tendencies to manifestation and activity are held in check by the tendency to restrain and obstruct. Infinite number of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas counteract their activities and bring about a state of tension. They relieve the tension. They relieve the tension and break the equilibrium under the influence of individual souls, Purushas. The equilibrium of the gunas is disturbed by some kind of influence of the Purushas. Prakriti evolves to realize their ends, experience and liberation. When the equilibrium of the gunas is distributed, some gunas overpower the other gunas and start the process of evolution. There is neither creation nor destruction of the gunas. The total amount of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas might be created not destroyed, increased not decreased. But when the universe, some gunas can overweight the others and produce heterogeneous effects. Production is non-manifestation or envelopment. The Sankhya clearly enunciated the doctrine of evolution. The manifold world is not created by God out of nothing, but it is evolved from Prakriti. The world is unconscious and cannot be the transformation of a spirit which is unchangeable and immutable. It is the transformation of the unconscious Prakriti or of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Prakriti and its evaluated Vikritis are subject to transformations. They can never be deprived of their essential nature of modifiability, evolution and dissolution. Prakriti is transformed into Mahat or cosmic intellect, Buddhi. Mahat is transformed into Ahankara or cosmic egoism. Ahankara is transformed into the 11 sense organs and the 5 tanmatras or subtle essence of sound, touch, color, taste and smell. The 5 subtle essences are transformed into 5 gross elements of sky, air, fire, water and earth. These are the 24 principles. In addition to these, there are Purushas. These are the 25 principles according to Sankhya, shown in the following chart on the screen. Purusha and Prakriti, which is the first cause of the word, and it produces Mahat. Mahat produces Ahankar, and Ahankar produces 11 sense organs, which includes mind, 5 sense organs and 5 motor organs. Further, Ahankar also produces 5 tanmatras, and 5 tanmatras produces 5 Mahabhutas, and the total number of the elements is 25th. The Sankhya recognizes above 25 principles of reality. Of these, Purusha is neither a cause or Purusha is neither a cause of the aggregate of all effects in the world. It is their ultimate cause, which is not the effect of any other cause. If it had any other cause, it would lead to infinite regress. Prakriti is a cause but not an effect. It is not a modification of any other ultimate cause. Purusha. The Sankhya advocates the dualism of Prakriti and Purusha. They are entirely different from each other because they have opposite characteristics. Prakriti is composed of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, while Purusha is not composed of them. Prakriti is non-discriminating, while Purushas are discriminating. Prakriti is an aggregate, while Purusha is simple. Prakriti is the object of knowledge, while Purusha is knower. Prakriti is unconscious, while Purusha is conscious. Prakriti is productive and transformed into modifications, while Purushas are non-productive and not subject to modification. Prakriti is active, while Purusha is inactive. The essential difference between Prakriti and Purusha lies in that the former is the unconscious and the known object, while the latter is the conscious knower or subject. The Sankhya recognizes the plurality of souls and the spiritual unity of each soul. The soul is distinct from its material vestment, the body, mind, intellect and egoism. It is distinct from Prakriti and its effects, and devoid of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. It is discriminating, simple, intelligent, non-productive, uncaused, eternal and immutable. It is beyond time, space and causality. It is the conscious knower. Liberation and its means. The self, Purusha, is eternally pure, enlightened and liberated. It appears to be in bondage and to be liberated from bondage. Its apparent bondage is due to its non-discrimination between itself and Prakriti, and its apparent liberation is due to discrimination between them. Liberation consists in absolute cessation of pain, which is the highest good. Supreme happiness is not the highest good, since it is exhausted. There is not unallowed happiness in our empirical life. Every day does not seek pleasure. Pleasure is always attended with pains and so regarded by the wise as pain. Liberation does not consist in happiness, but in total extinction and non-production of pain. Liberation is the absolute negation of threefold pain. The supreme release is total annihilation of threefold pain without leaving any trace of it. Knowledge is the direct means to release. It is discrimination of the self from Prakriti and its evaluated or direct knowledge of the self, Purusha. It annihilates suffering. It is aided by the practice of Eightfold Yoga. Now I would like to start Yoga philosophy. It is also a close part of Sankhya philosophy, and both are known as Yugal philosophy. The Yoga philosophy. The Yoga adopts the Sankhya metaphysics and engrafts our concept of God upon it. It is called theistic Sankhya, while the Sankhya system is called the atheistic Sankhya. The Yoga recognizes the reality of Prakriti and its evolutes, countless individuals, Purushas and God. Prakriti is the material cause of the world and God is its efficient cause. He is not the creator of Prakriti, nor is He the creator of souls. Prakriti and cereals are co-external with God. He disturbs the equilibrium of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas and starts the evolution of Prakriti. He is the creator of the Vedas and reveals them for the enlightenment of souls at the end of each cycle. He associates and disassociates souls and Prakritis in accordance with their merits and demerits and brings about evolution and dissolution of the world. He removes obstacles to the evolution of Prakriti and to the achievement of liberation by souls. The Yoga philosophy is an invaluable gift of the great Indian sage Patanjali to all bent upon spiritual realization. It is a great aid to those of the spirit as an independent principle, free from all limitations of the body, the senses and the mind. It is known as the Patanjali system after the name of its founder. The Yoga Sutra of Patanjali is known as the first work of this school of philosophy. Vyasa wrote a brief but valuable commentary on the Yoga Sutra called Yoga Bhashya or Vyas Bhashya. Vachaspati's Tattva Vaisharadi is a reliable sub-commentary on Vyasa's commentary. Bhoj Raja's Vritti and Yog Maniprabha are very simple and popular works of the Yoga system. Vigyan Bhikshu's Yog Vartik and Yog Sar Sangrah are other useful manuals of the Yoga philosophy. The value of Yoga as an important method of realizing the spiritual truths of Indian philosophy has been recognized by almost all the Indian systems. We have clear evidence of the recognition of yoga practices even in the Upanishads, the Smritis and the Puranas. So long as the mind or the intellect of a man is impure and unsettled, he cannot properly understand anything of philosophy and religion. We must have a pure heart and a tranquil mind if we are to know and realize the truths of philosophy and religion. The practice of yoga is the best way of self-purification, that is, purification of the body and the intellect. Hence, it is that almost all the systems of Indian philosophy insist on the practice of yoga as a necessary practical side of a philosophy of life. Meaning of yoga. Yoga means the cessation of mental functions or modifications, chitta vritti nirodha. It does not mean any kind of contact between the individual self and some other reality like God or the Absolute. The aim of yoga is to prevent the self from identifying itself with mental modifications. But this is not possible so long as the modifications are there and the self has not realized its distinction from chitta or mind. So, what yoga really stands for is the arrest and negation of all mental modifications. A man cannot realize spiritual truths so long as his mind is tainted with impurities and his intellect vitiated by evil thoughts. It is in the pure heart and the clear understanding that the truth of the spirit is revealed and directly experienced. The Sankhya Yoga system holds that liberation is to be attained by means of spiritual insight, pragya, into the reality of the self as the pure immortal spirit, which is quite distinct from the body and the mind, is purged of all impurities and rendered perfectly calm and seen. For the purification of enlightenment of chitta or the mind, the yoga gives us the eightfold means which consist of disciplines of first yama or restraint, second niyama or culture, third asana or posture, fourth pranayama or breath control, fifth pratyahara or withdrawal of the senses, sixth dharana or attention, and seventh dhyana or meditation, and last or eighth samadhi or concentration. These are known as sides to yoga, yogang. When practiced regularly with devotion and dispassion, they lead to the attainment of yoga, both sampragyat and asampragyat samadhi. The first discipline of yama or restraint consists in a. ahimsa or abstention from all kinds of injury to any life, b. satya or truthfulness in thought and speech, c. astey or non-stealing, d. brahmacharya or control of the carnal desires and passions, and e. aparigraha or non-acceptance of unnecessary gifts from other people. Although these practices seem to be too well known to don't require any elaboration, yet the yoga explains all their details and insists that a yogin must scrupulously follow them. The reason for this is obvious. It is a psychological law that a sound mind resides in a sound body, and that neither can be sound in the case of a man who does not control his passions and sexual impulses. So also a man cannot concentrate his attention on any object when his mind is distracted and dissipated by sin and crime and other evil properties. This claims the necessity of complete abstention from all the evil curses and tendencies of life on the part of the yogin who is eager to realize the self in samadhi or concentration. Asana is a discipline of the body and consists in the adoption of steady and comfortable postures. There are various kinds of asanas such as Padmasana, Virasana, Bhadrasana, etc. These can be properly learnt only under the guidance of experts. The discipline of the body is as much necessary for the attainment of concentration as that of the mind. If the body is not completely free from diseases and other disturbing influences, it is very difficult to attain concentration. Hence, the yoga lays down elaborate rules for maintaining the health of the body and making it a fit vehicle for concentrated thought. Pranayam is the regulation of breath. It consists in suspension of the breathing process either after exhalation, rechak, or inhalation, purak, or simply by retention of the vital breath, kumbhaka. The details of the process should be learnt from experts. The yoga goes further and prescribes breath control for concentration of the mind because it conduces to steadiness of the body and the mind. So long as the function of breathing continues, the mind also goes on fluctuating and noticing the current of air in and out. If and when it is suspended, the mind is in a state of undisturbed concentration. Hence, by practicing the control of breath, the yogin can suspend breathing for a long time and thereby prolong the state of concentration. Pratyahara. Pratyahara consists in withdrawing the sense from their respective external objects and keeping them under the control of the mind. When the senses are effectively controlled by the mind, they follow not their natural objects but the mind itself. So, in the state, the mind is not disturbed by signs and sounds coming through the eye and the ears, but makes these senses follow itself and see and heed its own object. This state is very difficult, although not impossible, of attainment. It requires a resolute will and long practice to gain mastery over one's senses. The 5 disciplines of restraint and culture, yam and niyam, bodily posture, asana, breath control, pranayam, and control over the senses, pratyahara, are regarded as the external aids to yoga, bahiranga sadhana. As compared with these, the last 3 disciplines are said to be internal to yoga, antarang sadhana, because they are directly related to some kind of samadhi or yoga. These are dharana, dhyan and samadhi. Dharana or attention. Dharana or attention is a mental discipline which consists in holding dharana or fixing the mind chitta on the desired object. The object thus attended to may be a part of one's body like one's navel, the midpoint of the eyebrows, etc. Or it may be external to the body like the moon, the images of gods, etc. The ability to keep one's attention steadily fixed on some object is the test of the fitness for entering on the next higher stage of yoga. Dhyana or meditation. Dhyana or meditation is the next step. It means the even flow of thought about, or rather round about, the object of attention. It is the steadfast contemplation of the object without any break or disturbance. This has the effect of giving us a clear and distinct representation of the object, first by parts and aspects, but by long continued meditation, the mind can develop the partial representation of the object into a full and live presentation of it. Thus, dhyana reveals the reality of the contemplated object to the yogin's mind. Samadhi or concentration. Samadhi or concentration is the final step in the practice of yoga. In it, the mind is so deeply absorbed in the object of contemplation that it loses itself in the object and has no awareness of itself. In the state of dhyana, the act and the object of thought remain distinct and separate state of consciousness. But in samadhi, the act of meditation is not separately cognized. It takes on the form of the object and loses itself as it were. So here only the object of thought remains shining in the mind, and we don't even know that there is process of thought in the mind. Till time I have discussed 4 schools of orthodox systems, that are Nyaya Vaisheshika and Sankhya Yoga philosophy. In my next lecture, I will be discussing the remaining 2 parts of orthodox systems and the focus on heterodox systems, especially on Charvaka philosophy. Thank you.